The world loves to pretend it has left chains in the past, as if iron shackles now belong only to museum displays and history textbooks. Imagine tomorrow you wake up trending worldwide, not for a new achievement or a viral dance, but because someone has uncovered every detail of your private life. That gut punch of exposure, that sudden helplessness, that's a sliver of what women endured when night fell in the slave quarters. Their bodies weren't just controlled, even their dreams were owned. Think you could stomach medieval justice or the daily humiliations of bondage? Spoiler, most modern people would faint before the real show even started. So, before we start, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? As the room softens around you, lean back and allow this story to unfold an experience unlike anything you've listened to until now. The first image is cruelly simple. Women lying down in rows, a chain threaded through iron collars at their necks, sometimes wrists, sometimes ankles. The iron rattles with every breath, every restless twitch. No one dares cough too loudly. It might be mistaken for defiance. Darkness magnifies the sound, turning each scrape into a reminder that freedom is not just absent, it is impossible. This is no temporary discomfort. It is the architecture of control. The guards who walk past with lanterns sometimes pause, pretending to check the locks. In reality, they relish the little games of fear, the sudden jangle of keys, the clatter of boots that echo long after they leave. The women pretend to sleep, eyes squeezed shut, because what else is there to do? Sleep is the only currency they have left, and even that is rationed by terror. Historical records describe this method bluntly. Chains were not only punishment, but preventive tools. In Roman markets, slaves were often displayed already shackled, partly to signal ownership, partly to warn buyers of troublemakers. Later, on American plantations, overseers justified chaining women at night as necessary for order. Historians still argue whether the practice was more common in large estates or smaller households, but the testimonies of those who lived it leave little doubt metal became part of the body. One quirky detail: archaeologists in the American South once uncovered remnants of iron links deliberately wrapped in cloth, as if someone tried to soften the edges. A shred of compassion, or maybe just an attempt to keep the metal from squeaking too loudly. Either way, it speaks volumes about how even chains became customized to daily life. The absurdity is clear. A system so paranoid it feared people in rags might rise at midnight and overthrow empires. That's like locking your refrigerator because you're afraid leftovers will stage a coup. Yet the logic stuck, reinforced by greed, fear, and a bureaucracy that treated flesh like inventory. Tonight's scene, though, is quieter than the daytime brutality. In darkness, the iron feels heavier, pressing into bone. Some women turn the links into lullabies, humming under their breath to sync the rhythm of their hearts with the rattles. Others try not to move at all, hoping numbness will trick the body into rest. And then there's the most human contradiction: fear and routine coexisting. A girl who has known nothing but chains since childhood sleeps faster than a new arrival. She shifts, sighs, and the chain tugs everyone else slightly, a reminder that even unconsciousness is shared. Individuality has no room here. The night is one organism made of dozens of bodies tied together. The high-impact image is undeniable. A row of women, breath rising in unison, iron glinting faintly whenever a lantern sways. And behind it all, an unanswered question lingers. If chains could silence them, what happened to the screams that never reached the surface? The morning doesn't begin with sunrise. It begins with the jangle of keys. The masters of paranoia live in constant fear that something will slip through the cracks, that the people they call property will discover the simple arithmetic of numbers that many bodies chained together might outweigh a few with whips. So, they double down on control. Iron is just the first layer. Surveillance becomes the second. An overseer strolls through the quarters, eyes sharp, face carefully neutral. He isn't here just to check the locks. He's here to remind everyone that they are being watched even in their most vulnerable hours. The fear is the point. Fear doesn't need to sleep. Fear works overtime. Records from 18th century plantations show that chaining women at night was often justified as protection, a laughable euphemism suggesting that the chains were for the slaves' own safety, as if predators prowled more than the men who claimed ownership of them. Historians still argue whether this was propaganda to appease outside criticism or whether some owners actually believed their own twisted rhetoric. Either way, the result was the same. The women woke with bruised wrists and swollen ankles. Protection indeed. It wasn't just the physical restraint that crushed them. It was the endless micromanagement of existence. Want to shift your sleeping position? The chain decides. Want to whisper to the person beside you? A guard might hear, and that whisper could be labeled conspiracy. Even dreams are policed by the possibility of interruption. Imagine someone barging into your bedroom every 2 hours to check if you're plotting rebellion. Now, imagine never having a bedroom in the first place. Here's the absurd twist. Paranoia turns masters into prisoners too. Slave owners built elaborate systems of checks and alarms, even chaining themselves metaphorically to routines of inspection. One quirky discovery from the Caribbean: plantation records include inventories of padlocks, dozens, sometimes hundreds, meticulously counted every season. Padlocks became as prized as livestock. Iron controlled not just the enslaved, but the minds of the enslavers, who slept poorly despite all their wealth. The irony: they were haunted by the very resistance they claimed could never exist, and yet those nightly rituals of surveillance carved themselves into the women's bodies. A chain isn't just heavy, it shapes posture, dictates how muscles develop, presses grooves into skin. One woman recalled in later testimony that she could still feel phantom links decades after emancipation, like an echo carved into her flesh. Think of people today who still feel a phone buzzing in their pocket even when it isn't there. The body remembers patterns it never wanted. Control seeped beyond the physical into symbolism. A chain became more than restraint. It was a declaration. You are never safe, never unobserved, never trusted. The masters knew that if fear settled deeply enough, rebellion would seem more dangerous than suffering. Yet paranoia breeds its own weaknesses. By obsessively tightening control, they revealed just how fragile their power truly was. Sometimes guards staged little performances, rattling keys louder than necessary, dragging boots across the floor, shining lanterns in faces without a word. They didn't need to shout. Silence itself was weaponized, and the women learned the art of stillness, of keeping breaths shallow, of pretending sleep even when every nerve screamed awake. Historians debate whether such cruelty was uniform or varied depending on geography, economy, or the temperament of the master. Some estates enforced strict chaining, others used ropes, some relied on threats alone. But the common thread was paranoia, an obsession with control so thorough it infected the very rhythms of the night. And here comes the bitter punchline. The chains weren't only about preventing escape, they were about breaking bonds between people. By tethering bodies in awkward angles, sleep itself became fragmented. Conversations died before they began. Relationships were strangled before trust could grow. Fear thrives best in isolation, and nothing isolates like the knowledge that even your neighbor's sigh might bring punishment on you both. The women know this. They sense it in their bones as the overseer's lantern disappears into the dark. Fear isn't just imposed from above, it is cultivated between them, like a poison that seeps into the cracks. The chain rattles once, then stills, but behind the quiet, the tension hums like a taut string ready to snap. And somewhere in that oppressive silence, one thought whispers louder than the rest. How long before someone tests the chain, just to see if it breaks? Sleep is supposed to be the cheapest medicine, the body's natural way of repairing itself. For the women lying in iron collars and ankle cuffs, it becomes a battlefield instead. The night isn't rest, it's endurance, measured breath by measured breath. Every twitch of muscle jerks the chain, dragging neighbors into half-wakefulness. One woman curls tightly into herself, trying to disappear inside her own skin. Another stares at the ceiling beams until her eyes blur, counting cracks instead of sheep. The masters call it rest hours. The women know it's a test of survival. Dreams, when they arrive, are fragile and fractured. A girl falls into half-sleep, imagining herself running barefoot through a field, wind in her hair, no iron clanging against bone. Just when the dream brightens, the chain tugs, and she jolts awake. Someone else shifted position, someone coughed, someone whimpered. Sleep is no longer individual, it's collective. If one suffers, all suffer. It's a grotesque parody of community. Historical fact: accounts from the transatlantic slave trade describe ships where enslaved people were packed below deck, chained together in 2s and 3s. Disease spread like wildfire, but what broke them faster was the inability to rest. Crowded bodies meant sleep became a negotiation with pain. That same system of stolen rest carried into plantations and households. The idea wasn't just to restrain people physically, but to erode their will through exhaustion. Sleep deprivation is one of the oldest tools of torture, and here it was normalized as nightly routine. What makes it more insidious is how the body adjusts. After weeks or months, women begin to micro-sleep, dozing in fragments of seconds, their brains scavenging whatever rest they can find. Modern science says even rats die if they're deprived of sleep too long. Humans may not die immediately, but memory fractures, moods collapse, and judgment dissolves. The enslavers knew it, even if they lacked the science. A tired slave is a manageable slave, and yet the human spirit resists in strange ways. Whispers bloom in the dark. Some women hum lullabies learned from their mothers, passing fragments of culture through iron bars. Others whisper stories, fairy tales, half-remembered myths, even gossip about the masters. It's risky. Guards punish talking conspiracies. But silence is a heavier burden. One quirky tidbit preserved in oral histories tells of women who invented entire new languages at night, hybrid codes of African dialects, English, and nonsense syllables just to confuse overseers. Imagine being so controlled that you smuggle freedom through syllables while lying chained on the floor. There's an argument among historians about whether these whispered traditions were acts of resistance or simply survival mechanisms. Some claim every joke, every song was rebellion, proof that culture cannot be extinguished. Others caution against romanticizing. The women may simply have been desperate for any distraction from the gnawing pain. The truth is probably both. Resistance and survival often wear the same face. The absurdity is that the masters thought chains guaranteed obedience. Yet they created nightly laboratories of resilience. Sleep became a weapon sharpened against them. Dreams of escape, coded lullabies, secret alliances whispered in darkness. Exhaustion dulled the body, but it also taught minds to operate in slivers of opportunity. Even a single glance exchanged in half-light could mean solidarity. Still, the toll is undeniable. Bodies grow gaunt, eyes hollow. Some women begin to lose teeth from malnutrition, jaws clenched against constant stress. Others develop sores where metal rubs raw. Infection festers in silence. The chain doesn't just bind, it carves, and hunger is always there. Bellies growl in chorus, a soundtrack to sleepless nights. The masters ration food carefully, convinced that hunger keeps people docile. But hunger also sharpens the mind. The smell of a rat scuttling past might spark the most outrageous thought. Could it be caught, roasted, eaten in secret? Desperation blurs boundaries between dignity and survival. The nights stretch longer in memory than they do on any clock. Time bends under fear. A single hour feels like a day. A night feels like a lifetime. Women trade tricks to measure time, listening for the rooster's first stir, counting the guard's footsteps, noting the shift of moonlight across the floor. Some become experts in silent clocks, reading shadows the way others read watches. Ironically, enslavers who meant to erase individuality accidentally forged astronomers, linguists, and psychologists in the crucible of sleep deprivation. Modern people like to boast about pulling all-nighters, as if skipping sleep for exams or parties proves resilience. Drop one of those braggarts into a chain gang of women trying to rest on bare planks, and they'd beg for mercy before sunrise. Missing one night of sleep for fun is a choice. Losing sleep every night under chains is an erasure of humanity. And always there's the interruption, the sudden lantern beam slicing the dark, the barked order to hush, the whip crack on the floorboards. The sound doesn't need to hit skin, it strikes the imagination. Every heart leaps into throats, breaths stop, and silence reasserts itself. One cough, and the punishment might fall on all. Fear multiplies faster than any disease. The most chilling cliffhanger is not a scream, not even a cry. It's the collective inhale, dozens of women holding breath at once, waiting for the guard to leave. When the lantern finally swings away, they exhale in unison. Relief is temporary, but the rhythm of that shared breath is unforgettable. The night stretches on, broken by hunger, whispers, jolts of pain, and half dreams. The women know tomorrow will bring labor under the sun, the same bodies forced to produce wealth for others. But in this moment, chained in the dark, they cling to the thinnest scraps of resistance songs that cannot be silenced, breaths that cannot be counted, thoughts that refuse to die. And yet, beneath every whisper and lullaby, one heavier question hums. How long before exhaustion becomes too heavy to fight, before even rebellion dissolves into silence? Whispers, that's where rebellion begins, not in trumpet blasts or charging armies. It begins in the half-choked murmur of women lying in the dark, daring to speak words the masters fear most. No iron can mute a mind forever. Chains restrict bodies, but thoughts slip through gaps like smoke, curling around links and drifting into ears nearby. One voice starts it, hesitant, almost indistinguishable from a prayer. Another joins, softer still. And suddenly a dozen women are sharing fragments of rumor. A man seen fleeing the plantation last week. A woman who supposedly poisoned her master's food. Whispers of ships docking with news of uprisings in distant colonies. Every whisper is a risk. One wrong ear could mean punishment so brutal it makes the chain feel like a necklace. And yet, the whispers persist. That's the paradox. Silence keeps you alive, but whispers keep you human. Historical fact. In 1791, enslaved people in Saint-Domingue, modern Haiti, planned their rebellion partly in secret gatherings at night. Songs, coded prayers, and whispered oaths bound them together long before machetes were raised. Historians still argue whether the infamous Bois Caiman ceremony, allegedly a voodoo ritual that sparked the Haitian Revolution, was real or partly legend, but the idea captures something undeniable. Whispers can become revolutions. What begins in shadows sometimes spills into daylight with fire. On plantations across the Americas, women carried that same role of quiet defiance. Their bodies bore the chains, but their tongues carried information, jokes, warnings. Some scholars note that enslaved women were often underestimated by overseers, who assumed their conversations were harmless chatter. That underestimation was a gift. What better camouflage for conspiracy than the sound of women humming lullabies? One quirky story circulates from Brazil. Enslaved women supposedly developed a lullaby with lyrics that, when decoded, revealed escape routes through the cane fields. The melody soothed children to sleep, but the words mapped rebellion. It's the kind of ingenuity that makes you realize how ridiculous paranoia and cruelty look when confronted with creativity. While masters counted padlocks and chains, women were inventing Google Maps in lullaby form. Still, rebellion isn't just about planning revolts. It's about small victories too, hiding scraps of food, teaching a child a forbidden word, braiding hair with patterns that symbolize resistance. Historians still debate whether these acts should be considered resistance or simply survival. But here's the irony: to survive under chains at all is already resistance. The chain rattles, and whispers die mid-breath. A guard passes, lantern light washing over closed eyes, slack jaws, the pantomime of sleep. The moment he's gone, the whispers resume. They're quieter now, as if the iron itself might tattle. Women lean lips close to ears, exhaling warmth into hair as they trade secrets like currency. Trust is rare, so every whispered alliance feels like treasure. But trust is also fragile. Fear is corrosive. Some women suspect spies among them, forced to inform in exchange for crumbs of favor. The chain becomes a double prison, linking them together while also separating them with paranoia. It's the cruel genius of the system, making even solidarity dangerous. Imagine trying to plot rebellion when your every movement wakes half the room. One cough, one sneeze, and suspicion ripples. Who coughed? Was it on purpose? Did the guard hear? Paranoia isn't just a master's disease, it seeps into the enslaved too, poisoning unity. Yet somehow, whispers still find a way to survive, slipping under suspicion like water through cracks. The absurd comedy is that overseers believed chaining people at night would smother conspiracy. In practice, it created perfect classrooms for it, forced people to lie together, breathing the same stale air, and you force intimacy. You force the exchange of glances, sighs, words too soft to catch. The chain becomes both shackle and lifeline. Consider the psychology. A woman too terrified to speak by day finds courage at night, when the world shrinks to a whispering circle of linked bodies. In that circle, she admits her hatred, her hope, her plan. Fear still wraps her, but the whisper releases a fraction of it. Multiply that by dozens, and paranoia backfires spectacularly. The overseers engineer silence, but accidentally plant seeds of rebellion. And yet, rebellion whispers are not only about escape or uprising. Sometimes they're about revenge fantasies, the kind whispered like bedtime stories. One day, the chain will rust, someone mutters. Another replies, one day, he will choke on his own whip. These aren't plans, they're dreams. Psychological pressure valves. But dreams have power. History is full of revolts that began as impossible dreams. Still, punishment lurks in the background. Everyone knows the price of being caught. Chains at night are only the beginning. Whips by day, stocks in the yard, families torn apart. The women whisper with the awareness that one wrong syllable could cost a life. That's the cliff they live on nightly, balancing survival against sanity. One odd but documented tidbit. Some enslaved communities believed spirits could slip through chains, that ancestors could drift into the quarters at night to protect them. In some testimonies, women described whispering not just to each other, but to the dead, asking for guidance, for strength, for vengeance. Whether literal or symbolic, these spirit conversations gave them a weapon the overseers couldn't lock away. What do you do against enemies who believe ghosts are on their side? So the night stretches long, filled with whispers, silences, interruptions. A guard's boots fade and murmurs swell again. A woman mutters news of an escape. Another shakes her head, warning that runaways often meet dogs or worse. A third insists freedom is worth any risk. The debate itself is rebellion, a refusal to accept chains as the only reality. By now, sleep is impossible for many. The room hums with tension, an underground current of hope and dread. Some women drift into shallow dreams, murmuring fragments aloud without realizing it. Others lie awake, memorizing every rumor, storing whispers like weapons for a war that may never come. And then, as dawn teases the edges of sky, one chilling possibility dawns with it. What if the chain doesn't break them, but instead teaches them exactly how to break the masters? Dawn creeps in slowly, not as relief, but as exposure. The faint light that seeps through cracks in the wooden walls feels less like morning and more like a stage spotlight. Every bruise, every indentation left by the chain, every swollen ankle is suddenly visible. Night was cruel, but at least darkness offered the illusion of invisibility. Daylight removes even that. The women shift, groaning quietly as they attempt to rise together. That's the first humiliation of the morning, movement dictated not by their own bodies, but by the chain that binds them. If one rises too quickly, the others stumble. If one lingers too long, she's yanked forward by the iron. The system is designed to remind them at every second, individuality is gone. They are a single organism controlled by metal, dragged from sleep into labor. And yet, in this fragile, fumbling moment, they look at one another. The eyes say what mouths cannot. I heard you last night. I remember your whisper. We are not alone. That silent recognition is almost enough to spark warmth in the chest, even as the iron cuts into the skin. The guards enter. They don't speak immediately. They don't need to. They just stand, arms crossed, eyes scanning. The silence is worse than shouting. Then comes the unlocking, one shackle at a time, metal scraping against metal. It should feel like liberation, but it doesn't. It's just a transfer from night shackles to daytime labor. Historical fact, on plantations in the American South, some owners chained women not only at night, but during fieldwork as well, forcing them to hoe rows of cotton while tethered together. Historians still argue whether this was widespread or limited to particularly brutal estates, but the fact that it happened at all is indictment enough. The women in chains never had true rest, day or night. The system devoured hours, turning even the most natural human need, sleep, into a battleground. The absurd irony is clear. Chains meant to prevent rebellion often forged deeper unity. Women who never would have spoken by day found solidarity in night whispers. Overseers, obsessed with control, unwittingly created bonds strong enough to endure decades. Oppression can smother, but sometimes it compresses into diamond-hard resistance. But in the short term, the damage is relentless. The women shuffle forward, wrists raw, skin tender. Some cradle their stomachs, hungry from rations too thin to sustain labor. Others bite lips against tears because tears draw punishment. And still, they carry the whispers with them. The secrets of the night are tucked behind stoic faces as they march out into fields or kitchens. Quirky detail: one surviving letter from an overseer in Jamaica complained that chained slaves sang too much, even while tethered. He couldn't understand why people in bondage would sing. Historians now suggest the songs were coded communication directions, warnings, or just stubborn declarations of life. The overseer heard noise. The women created symphonies of survival. The silence after singing ends is heavy, but the silence after chains are removed is heavier still. That moment, when wrists are free but not really free, is where fear settles deepest. They know the shackles will return tonight. The absence of iron is temporary, a cruel reminder of what waits. Freedom flickers only as absence, never as presence. And yet, in the midst of this bleak rhythm, one truth persists: silence has weight. Every morning, women carry not just the bruises of iron, but the unspoken knowledge of what happened in the dark. They carry the rumors of escape, the memory of lullabies, the ache of laughter swallowed too quickly. The masters imagine silence equals compliance, but silence is storage. It's the vault where rebellion waits. This is the paradox the enslavers never solve. You can chain a body, you can starve it, you can rob it of sleep, but silence accumulates. It becomes heavier with each unspoken thought, until one day, the weight is unbearable and it tips into action. History shows it. Haiti in 1791, Jamaica in 1831, Nat Turner in Virginia. Rebellions often shocked slave owners, who wondered how their order collapsed overnight. They never realized that order was a facade built on silence too heavy to sustain. As the sun climbs higher, the women move into their daily roles. Some will cook for households, others bend in fields, others care for children who do not belong to them. Their hands perform labor, but their minds circle back to the night. Did you hear the rumor? Did you catch the song? Did you see the look in her eyes? Even in daylight, the chain echoes. The cruel genius of this system is its cyclical nature. Fear at night ensures exhaustion by day. Exhaustion by day ensures submission at night. Round and round it goes. But within that cycle, cracks appear. Exhaustion doesn't erase memory. Fear doesn't fully erase trust. In fact, the very act of surviving becomes defiance. Scholars debate whether enslaved women's nightly chains should be viewed primarily as instruments of discipline or as symbols of patriarchal control layered atop racial domination. The answer is both. The chains were tools, but they were also statements. You are not just property. You are property that must be feared, and fear, once revealed, is weakness. The women know it, even if they can't say it aloud. The very fact that overseers fear their escape proves their power. No one locks up what they believe is harmless. No one fears the powerless. The chain itself is proof of strength, and so the day drags on, filled with labor, hunger, and silence. But behind the silence hums the memory of whispers, and behind the memory hums the possibility of something more. As the sun sets again and the chains rattle back into place, the cycle resumes. But tonight, like every night, whispers will slip through cracks. Lullabies will carry coded truths, dreams will dare to imagine more, and the weight of silence will grow heavier, pressing closer to the moment when it breaks. Because silence never lasts forever. The edges of the story begin to blur now, as though the iron links that clattered and bruised moments ago are dissolving into smoke. What was once heavy, metallic, and sharp softens into something distant and almost unreal. The chains fade into echoes, and the room where women lay side by side in fear becomes hazy, more memory than reality. The voices that whispered in the dark are quieter now, less desperate, more like a lullaby floating on the night air. Let the rhythm slow. The breath slows to yours, mine, theirs. In that slowing, there is relief. Imagine each rattle of iron unwinding itself, a clasp falling open, a link sliding away until the weight is gone. The skin, raw and indented, is no longer bound. The body, once tethered to others by force, begins to feel light. Shoulders settle, muscles soften. Even as history held its grip, there were always cracks where humanity slipped through. That is what endures, not the cruelty. Think of the women whispering lullabies in the dark, threading fragments of song through fear. Think of the coded jokes, the shared looks, the murmured prayers to ancestors believed to pass through chains like smoke. Those moments, the quiet acts of defiance, outlived the overseers, outlived the iron. They are what linger now, reaching across time, softer than any punishment, stronger than any rule. You don't need to imagine the pain in detail anymore. Let that fade. Instead, hold on to the resilience. Think of a wrist once cuffed in cold metal, now opening freely to the air, palm warm and relaxed. Think of ankles stepping lightly across grass, no weight dragging them back. Think of voices, once hushed, now singing openly, not in codes or fragments, but in fullness. The harsh silence of control becomes a silence of peace, vast and gentle, wrapping around you like a blanket. Notice how the mind settles when the noise recedes. The women's whispers slow into a hum, then into breath, then into calm. It is not the silence of suppression anymore. It is the silence of safety, of finally being able to rest without fear of interruption. Imagine lying back into that safety. The floor no longer hard, the air no longer stale, the body no longer bound. Just rest, long and uninterrupted, the kind denied to them but open to you now. Let time stretch. Nights that once felt endless are behind us. What stretches ahead is a space without chains, where hours pass without punishment, where sleep flows without fear. Even if you carry the story with you, it no longer weighs heavy. It becomes a gentle reminder that even in the darkest times, humanity sought and found ways to endure. As your breathing evens, imagine the chain falling into the earth, rusting away, sinking into the soil until it is nothing but dust. Above it, grass grows tall, swaying freely in the wind. No trace of iron remains, only the sound of wind, leaves, water somewhere in the distance. That sound is what carries you forward now, calm and steady. Their whispers do not disappear. They have transformed. They linger as stories, as lessons, as a soft voice telling you that survival is possible, that cruelty cannot last forever, that rest will come. You can hear them still if you listen, not frightened, not silenced, but gentle, like guides leading you deeper into sleep. So, as the night folds around you, let your body sink. Let your thoughts drift slower, further, until they blur into nothing but quiet. The story is over. The weight has gone. What remains is rest. And when you wake, their whispers will still be here, carried through time, outlasting chains, outlasting fear. Next time, we'll journey into another strange chapter of human history, one you'll never look at the same way again.